France is truly a land of contrasts. On the one hand, it has historically been a leader in the arts, science, and cuisine, and on the other hand, it was one of the most prominent practitioners of colonialism and has some of the filthiest and most dangerous cities in Europe. To get to the bottom of these contrasts, we bring you the 10 things you didn't know about France. French people tend to drink a lot of wine, consume a great deal of pastries, and pretty much eat whatever they want, but strangely do not suffer from an obesity epidemic like the United States and United Kingdom. You see, while it is true that the French eat sweets and fatty foods, the portions are much smaller than other places, so they just end up eating a lot less in general, which means fewer calories, which means less obesity. If you've ever seen American food portions and compared them with French ones, you'd immediately see the difference. When you think of French cuisine, you typically think of croissant, crêpes, and escargot. But what you may not know is that the French love horse meat just as much, if not more. La viande de cheval, or horse meat, is so popular that there are specialized butchers, called boucherie chevaline in French, just for that particular type of meat, where they offer a wide variety of choice cuts from the animal to suit everyone's cooking needs. You might turn your nose up at the idea of slaughtering cute ponies for your pony burger, but at the end of the day, it's all just a matter of culture and perspective. Laïcité, or secularity, is one of the defining characteristics of the French government. In the simplest terms, this means a separation of religion from the affairs of the state, but the reality is a bit muddier than that, as is often the case with such matters. You see, unlike the American Constitution, which only loosely defines a separation between church and state, the French Constitution is far more direct about it. Article 1 of the French Constitution formally states the following: La France est une république indivisible, laïque, démocratique et sociale. Or in English, France is an indivisible republic, secular, democratic, and social. So while there is freedom of religion in a similar fashion to that of the United States, when public life becomes too affected by religion, the French government worries. This has led to greater tension between the secular state of France and French Muslims, and the long-term consequences of this remain to be seen. You probably don't know this, but France actually has a serious issue with feces, and by that we mean dog feces. The French certainly love their dogs, but they don't really seem to enjoy cleaning up after them. Dog feces on French urban streets has been a long-standing problem throughout the country, and as one American living in Paris put it in an article titled "Paris, Dog Shit Capital of the World," quote, "Paris lovers try not to notice the dog poop everywhere, but they have to be careful anyway. In my neighborhood, if you don't have your eyes riveted on the sidewalk as you walk, you will have a nasty surprise on your shoes when you get home. Hundreds of people a year wind up in the hospital after slipping in the dog poop. One of them was our ancient concierge who died from the fall." Despite attempting to introduce fines for violators, it hasn't been particularly successful, since fine tickets are almost never issued. So the next time you're walking around a major French city, better look down on the ground as often as you look ahead, because if you don't, you could be in for a nasty surprise. Given this problem, maybe France should just change its motto from "Vive la France" to "Vive la crotte de chien." The French have a pretty laid-back attitude when it comes to marriage, meaning that when it comes to affairs, people generally don't seem to mind. Politicians have affairs that would cause huge scandals in the United States, but the French don't bat an eyelash about it. Polls were given to French people asking their opinions and thoughts on infidelity, and the answers might shock Americans. Most respondents said that cheating was natural and inevitable, and infidelity doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. That attitude might not sit well with Americans, but for the French, it's just another matter of "je m'en fous," or, in English, whatever, screw it. If you know French, you might know the expression "faire la grève," meaning to go on strike. Going on strike is more common in France than anywhere else in Europe, and possibly the world. For the French, going on strike is a way of life. On any given day, if there's a shutdown of a service you're familiar with, chances are that someone is on strike, but the real question is why they do it in the first place. The historian Sirot stated that while in other northern European countries, strikes tend to follow failed negotiations, in France, the strike action normally precedes negotiations or runs alongside with them, meaning the French like to flex their muscles before taking on their employers in order to maintain their benefits. Next time you're in France and the train doesn't show up, you probably already know why. France is home to possibly the most dangerous city in Europe, Marseilles. Muggings, robbery, theft, and an ongoing drug war are all commonplace events in Marseilles, much more so than in other parts of France, and gang life there can give the Crips and the Bloods a run for their money. And to top it off, the city is filthy to boot, filled with trash, urine, and feces, which has occasionally earned it the title the dirtiest city of Europe. The violence and crime affects even tourists who report on being mugged and robbed, and Marseilles is sometimes referred to as one giant no-go zone for anyone sane. No one really knows the causes behind all the rampant crime, though the usual suspects of lack of integration, unemployment, as well as cultural and religious differences are given blame. But regardless of whether or not you're French, Marseille is probably a place best avoided if you value your life and property. Located in the far northwest of the country, Brittany is quite different from the rest of France. In addition to the French language, they speak a Celtic language called Breton. The modern-day inhabitants of Brittany are descendants of British refugees fleeing from the death and destruction visited by the Anglo-Saxons in the early Middle Ages. And of course, they took their language with them. Breton is very different from French and is most closely related to Welsh, since ultimately they were once the same language at some point in time. Years of cultural dispossession have whittled down the number of Breton speakers, though, from about 1 million in 1950 to about 200,000 in the early 21st century, earning the language the classification of severely endangered. Still, there has been renewed interest in Breton language and culture, and there has been a slight increase in bilingual education in very recent years. Many people express concern over Islam in Europe, but nearly 1,300 years ago, there was a greater Islamic threat to Europe than had ever existed before. The Umayyad Caliphate had stretched from modern-day Afghanistan to encompass almost the entirety of the Iberian Peninsula. It was into this climate that many consider one of the greatest of pre-French heroes was born, since at that time France as a concept had not yet existed. The name of this hero was the Frankish statesman and military leader Charles Martel. He is best known for having defeated the Moors in the historic Battle of Tours on October 10, 732, thus permanently ending the threat of a Muslim invasion and caliphate in Europe, laying down the foundations of the Frankish Empire and further down the line, modern France. It was after this historic victory that chroniclers at the time gave him the name Martel, from the late Latin marterus, meaning hammer, given to him because of the tremendous force he applied at Tours Poitiers in 732. There was a time when French was considered the language of diplomacy, science, and polite conversation, and French influence and trends had spread throughout Europe. One of the cornerstones of this belief in the French way of things was the founding of l'Académie française, or the French Academy. It was officially established by Cardinal Richelieu in 1635 and remains intact to this day. Its purpose is simple: to regulate and maintain the integrity of the French language. This task became increasingly important in light of the rise of English as the de facto world language, with noticeable pushback from the Academy, declaring so-called Anglicisms, or English loanwords, foreign and thus not fit to be used. Words such as weekend, meeting, and brunch. But to no avail, because language has a life of its own, and no authority really has the power to regulate it. For more top lists like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to check out our other videos, and we'll see you all next time.